So I'm going to give a very short introduction to my campaign, why I'm running, and what my platform is, who I am, what I do, and then I want to open up for like 3 or 4 questions, if you guys have any questions. So first of all, thank you guys for having me down. I really love Athens a lot, and so it's a really great opportunity. This is actually the kind of place I envision when I think of Athens, like living in Athens. I've never had a chance to do that, but I went to UGA to get my master's in classical languages, so I used to drive kind of close to here all the time. My name is Josh McCall. I've lived in the 9th District all of my life, and maybe 10, 15 years ago, I used to sit around. I'd like to drink coffee and sort of leisurely read politics. And this past election, I realized I could no longer just sip my lattes and read about the news that things are getting really dangerous for a lot of people. So one of the reasons I came out in this campaign was because there was some guy from Vermont who said something I'd always thought, but I never thought it was a political possibility. I always thought, how is it that people who are dying can't get health care if they're poor? How do we allow that to happen? But of course, when you raise that possibility, in the halls of Congress, which are about as responsive as the statues around Congress, they say, no, it's not possible. That kind of thing is not possible in America. But when Bernie Sanders started speaking about it, I began to imagine the possibility of a universal healthcare system, Medicare for all, where, in a better world, nobody would die because they're poor, and nobody would go broke because they're dying. And so he inspired me to start stretching the bounds of what is politically possible in America, that we actually can push for real progressive values in this country. And if you walk around this district, a lot of people that you would not expect to be Bernie fans, people have come up to me several times and said, hey, I'm a conservative, but I would have voted for Bernie. I think that given 2 things that have been happening in this developments in the past 10, 20 years, inequality, which is rising all the time. People are finding it harder just to pay the bills. They're working on basically debt slavery. I don't use that term lightly because I really don't like when people make blasé comparisons between modern day conditions and African American slavery, apartheid slavery. But people do work hours and hours, 60, 80 hours a week, just to pay their debts, which are always accumulating. Inequality is getting wider. People who work the least are making more and more of the money, and people who work the most are making less and less money. This is when I decided that it was time for me to stand up and try to actually influence the Democratic Party. My personal belief is that Franklin Delano Roosevelt died and left some unfinished business. His Social Bill of Rights is what I'm actually running on. One of the pieces of the Social Bill of Rights was universal health care, that everybody should have a chance to get healing, to alleviate anguish, whether it's physical or mental, that should be a right, that it shouldn't be something on the marketplace. Because I can choose not to buy a Toyota, but if I have a heart attack or Alzheimer's, I can't exactly choose not to get treatment. And of course, the way they have healthcare now, if you're very poor and very injured, you can sometimes qualify for Medicaid. If you're a woman, you can get healthcare from Planned Parenthood. If you're elderly, you can get healthcare through Medicare. But the issue with that is that leaves us divided, that politicians, like they're doing now, or like they have been doing, they can target, right? They can go and target women at Planned Parenthood. They can target the elderly next, because they're not gonna stop, right? It's not like they're gonna stop once they move on from Planned Parenthood. So if we could only make everybody aware that healthcare is a universal human problem instead of a political problem only for women or only for the poor, then I think that our country would be much better off. So that's the number one part of my campaign. I want to call it the American Health Insurance Plan, because the best health insurance plan of all would be where everybody pays in. It's the biggest pool you can imagine. And then you get to take your money, our money, and you get to go to the doctor that you choose and get the medical treatment that you need. So that's my number one priority. But I have a few other ideas too. And so one of those ideas is a push for universal employment. My friend and former professor, Dr. Winfield, has actually persuaded me that full employment would be both politically possible and a winning item for Democrats if they choose to be actual progressives this time around. Right? There's no reason why we don't have full employment, and I do believe that in the 60s, starting in the 60s, but really Reagan being the sort of, I guess you would call it the apex of this pyramid, we've been for a long time picturing all Americans as just consumers. People who go and buy something from the store, and one of my favorite lines actually is from this essay called Consider the Lobster. You guys ever read the essay Consider the Lobster? It's a really cool essay, but in that essay he's on vacation and he says, like everybody on vacation, I'm a consumer, so I am economically interesting but existentially loathsome. And I would like to take America from envisioning themselves simply as consumers who go in and buy a product and then walk away with no connection to the person who made it, no connection to the things that are affected by that product, right? So one of the first places we need to start, of course, is oil. And we need to make bold, aggressive investments in green energy that would be local, that would be jobs that would be robot-proof. They would even be Republican-proof, I hope. If you had local jobs building solar panels, solar panels and windmills, which is, by the way, the fastest growing, it's number one fastest growing job in America is building windmills for electricity. So if we could do that, and if we could convince people that their collective self-interest is aligns with green energy, I think that's the way to go forward. I don't think people care. People have to go to work in the morning. They don't have time to do the research, and they really do when somebody comes up to them and says, well, actually, right, the well, actually liberals, right? If you look at the statistics, right, people don't live on statistics. We're human beings. Statistics don't wake people up in the morning. Statistics don't, get people married and get them to invest in their family. So I believe that if we can convince people that it's in their own self-interest, this is the way forward for full employment, local employment. So that's one thing that I want to do is invest in aggressive green energy. Now, where are we going to find the money? There is a place in America that is actually really stacked with cash right now. It's not places, where close to where we live, but it's in Wall Street. Mm-hmm. Now, I know that when I pay my taxes every year, and I'm glad to pay them. I pay local teachers, firefighters, policemen, and I'm glad to pay my taxes to support good, solid jobs with retirement benefits and union membership and all that. I'm happy to provide that. They come to my house, which is not worth that much, but they take a percentage of what that house is worth. It's a wealth tax, basically. I believe that's where we need to move in this nation. There are way too many ways to hide income. And so if we went to Wall Street, the New York Stock Exchange, and every company that's registered there, and we actually assessed how much are your holdings to a company, let's say Goldman Sachs. I don't think there are a whole lot of Americans who feel very sorry for Goldman Sachs these days. So I believe that it would be really politically powerful. Not only that, and not even to punish them. Nothing. This is not a goal to punish anybody. But the problem is that they thrive off of the goodwill of society. In 2008, the corporations and the banks went to Washington and they said, we're dying. And Washington said, how much money do you need? And the bigger the loser got the bigger cash haul, right? But if actual human beings of flesh and blood with a beating heart go to their Washington representatives like Doug Collins and say, I'm dying. I can't save myself. I don't have enough money. He says, I've got mine. Good luck. So what we've got to do is change the system where, what I would shoot for in my wildest dreams is in America, human beings having equal rights to corporations. Just equal rights to corporations, right? So I believe that corporations need to pay their fair share into the system. So I believe a top corporate tax rate of 40% with no deductions, with no loopholes, we would not have a deficit. We would be able to invest in local green energy, and we would actually be able to put people to work in their communities producing things again. And so the last plank that I'd like to talk to you guys about today is reviving the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps. Wildly popular program started by FDR. and it would take people, they would plant trees, they would build trails, they would work on preserving local places. Now back then, it only worked on rural areas, but I believe that in a modern society, after the fallout from Detroit, after these plants leave and go overseas, I believe that we need to work actually on our own communities. Urban renewal projects would also fall under this umbrella. The path to full employment is working on our communities. So picture this, a civilian conservation corps, where you'd have a contract, kind of like the military, 4-year commitment, right? Because you need to actually plan these things, right? So you go to a place like Atlanta, where they use code words now, inner city. Poor Atlanta, which is often minorities, right? Building libraries, building gyms, actually working on tutoring programs, offering government-funded daycare for working single mothers, right? This would be the Civilian Conservation Corps, because if there's anything we need to conserve, it's also urban communities that are falling apart right now with no investment. And of course, we could also work in the rural areas as well. There are plenty of places in Appalachia that need to be reforested, because after the coal mines have gone through and stripped some of these mountaintops, they could be reforested to prevent erosion and to save some of these forests. So I believe that reviving the Civilian Conservation Corps, making it a quasi-military program where you commit to a 4-year contract, you could also leverage this program to guarantee year-for-year scholarship programs for every American, right? So if you wanted to make a 2-year commitment, you could get a guaranteed 2-year technical school scholarship. It would be the Civilian Conservation Corps scholarship. And then a 4-year program for people who want to go to undergrad, so that everybody could go to school fully funded after investing in their local communities and giving them some time after high school, while their brains develop, to actually figure out what they want to do with their life. Many people go to college right now with no idea what they actually want to do with the rest of their lives. But this would give them a chance to go into local areas and actually learn what the needs of our nation are, and then to come out of that with a sense of who they are and who they want to be. That's my vision. That's my platform. It's pretty bold. It's pretty progressive. But I think that, no matter what I propose, if it's anything to the left of, corporate fascism, I'm going to be called a socialist. So I might as well just, go ahead and propose some programs that would actually help society and help human beings. And if I'm going to be called a socialist anyway, I don't think Democrats are doing their jobs unless they're being accused of being socialists.
Yeah.
You'll recall there were some dire warnings about Social Security. If you feed old people and give them enough food so they don't have to eat cat food, the next thing you know, Stalin's going to be here with the gulag. And oddly enough, that did not happen. And not only did it not happen, Social Security is one of the non-negotiables in politics now. Even candidate Donald Trump, that famous left-wing thinker, said, "I will not cut Social Security." Of course, he lied, but as a candidate, he won because he said he wasn't going to cut Social Security. Medicare and Medicaid. Remember when it was passed, Reagan gave that grim prediction that, of course, the next thing you do, if you actually heal poor people and keep them from dying, next thing you know, Khrushchev's going to be here with his ships and Cuba's going to move in, right? And it never happened. And once again, Medicare and Medicaid, another one of those rails of American politics. So when we do things, no matter what you label it as, that actually help human beings, that put wisdom, justice, and mercy at the top of our political spectrum instead of greed, it's enduring, it's lasting, because everybody realizes that their interests are involved, that their children who are about to graduate have a stake in this. Because the people on the bottom of society are always the ones who see the truth about society. The waves of history that are always moving, that are always changing, they beat on the oppressed the hardest, and they see the grim truths of our society. So and I'll close on this and I'll take a few questions, but when I first started my campaign, I thought, what problem should I look at, right? What vision should I have for my campaign? And I really thought, okay, who sees the truth about our society? I thought about people who are locked out of the hospital. I heard stories from people who have multiple sclerosis, who have to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month just to save their lives. I got stories from people who were in the LGBT community who were worried about the future and worried about their status in society. And I thought about immigrant workers, and I thought about my own wife's parents who were refugees from Vietnam. And I thought, we have got to do so much work in this country and most of all in the society, to make sure that people actually have a collective interest in our shared humanity. Because fundamentally, I believe that what makes us human makes us equal.